Hey, Lisa. Hey, thanks for joining the show. So again, tell us a little bit about yourself. We talked a little bit offline. Um, what what brought you to this point?
Oh, well, first of all, I mean, since fatherhood is such a big deal, I
No.
should say that I am a daughter. I'm the oldest of three girls, and
Okay.
my dad is one of the closest people to me in the world. And he and I still he's 85. He's an identical twin, so I almost feel like I have two dads, and we still have lunch every single week together.
Really, I love that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. So, and I could not have gotten to where I am without my dad. My dad has been one of my biggest supporters in getting me through all of this. So,
Okay.
currently, I am a high conflict divorce strategist that specializes in something called legal abuse. And that's where somebody's ex is using the legal system to wear them down and bleed them dry. So, me and my male partner, Chris, who is also a father, we help men and women all over the world dealing with the worst divorces, custody battles, and co-parenting hell, and help them save as much time and money and energy throughout the family court system and beyond. So I spent 10 years in the legal system myself. I represented myself for about 7.5 years on both the family court and the appellate court, the higher court level. When I argued at the appellate court level, I not only won, but my case was so notable that it got published as case law, which is really a big honor for an attorney. And I'm not an attorney. Um,
Yeah. I,
um,
I I was reading that. I'm like, wow. Okay.
yeah,
Like, you did the thing. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Well, I couldn't have done it without my dad, though. My dad was always in the background. So, yeah, and then helped pass something called Jennifer's Law, which helped my state expand their legal definition of domestic violence to include all of that invisible abuse. And I'm sure we'll get into psychological abuse.
Yes.
And then my ex sued my partner and I for $4 million in defamation in civil court. We got that thrown at ourselves. And then I always say we had our first baby in 2023, book called Been There, Got Out: Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances, especially dealing with someone like that in the legal system. And then the most recent book just came out a couple months ago. It's called When Your Ex Turns Your Kids Against You. And unfortunately, that is a big issue for women and men, more so fathers. There's about 22 million separated and divorced parents in just America and Canada alone who are dealing with this situation. Yeah, it's one of those things that people tend to not talk about very much, but I'm
Yeah.
happy to talk about whatever you want.
No. Hey, listen. That I'm excited now. First off, let's talk about the books real quick because listen, when your ex the second book, when your ex
Turns the
turns,
kids against you.
yes. Okay. I talk to guys about this all the time, and through just social media, I see a lot of it posted. I just watched a video today, actually, before we got started, where a mother actually took her daughter from graduation because she didn't want the dad to be there. So I'm like, I don't understand. When do we make the kids the priority and not getting back at each other? And I understand that it can't go both ways. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. It definitely goes both ways. But from my experience, it is mostly men who get punished, you know, by the ex and the court system. And I've been in both sets of those shoes.
hmm Yeah, yeah. I mean, our experience is it's really, and I interview dozens of lawyers and psychologists and people also involved in the family court system for our own podcast. And when it comes to legal abuse, um, lawyers agree that it's kind of half and half. But some lawyers have told me that they do feel that men suffer a bit more in the legal system,
Okay.
especially when it comes to custody.
Okay. So how long's the book been out?
It just came out in March.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and there's a guy who the guy who wrote the foreword to it was like our guru. His name is Bill Eddy. He's
Okay.
written at least 20 books. Anyone dealing with a very difficult ex should read the book Splitting, and it's about how to divorce someone with narcissism or borderline personality disorder because it is a whole different experience. And
Right.
when you talk about why can't we, when do we put the kids first? When you're dealing with someone with a personality disorder and or an active addiction, their
Okay.
judgment is impaired, so they cannot put the kids first, and they don't, and they will go to the ends of the earth to destroy you, and they usually put their kids in the middle.
Yeah, and I just I see a lot of it, and again, my kids are a little bit older now. We bump heads about a lot of things because w I had to be the tough parent, I didn't get the option to, you know what, go drinking on the weekends, go partying, this, that, and the other thing because, I had to be the one that was there, so while I don't and I say this to this day, I do not hate their mom, I absolutely do not, but she's always been given the benefit of the doubt, or like if there's a tough situation going on, she gets to cry and everybody feels bad for her. But for me, I have to hold the kids accountable for behavior. I have to hold the kids accountable for grades and so on and so forth. And yeah, I was a very tough father, very tough, because I didn't want my kids repeating, my life, you know. And now it seems like they they don't understand what I tried to do for them, And again, yeah, my other daughter, same situation. Her mom, she actually took me to court because I spanked her.
Your daughter did or the mom?
Well, the
Okay.
mom took me to court. Yeah, the mom took me to court because I spanked her. Now the thing is that this was a result of her hauling off and slapping her brother in the face. Okay.
Mm.
Huge handprint across this boy's face and everything. You know, I spanked her and I did spank her on the butt, but one time I went just a little too high. I swatted her across the butt, small mark on her butt. I mean, smaller than my pinky nail. And I got drug into court for that.
Yeah. It
No history
happens.
whatsoever. No history whatsoever. And, it almost prevented me from joining the military, all that stuff you
Yeah.
know, and to this day, my daughter doesn't still she believes that she was abused, you know, and there's no accepting responsibility that this was a result of something you did. It wasn't like I came home one day and was like, "Hey, I'm just beating the crap out of everybody because I got nothing else better to do." There was never anything like that. And I feel like there's a lot of men who go through similar situations because their ex is wants to get back at them for something. So, hey, you did this with your kid. I'm taking you to court. I'm calling the police, kind of deal.
Yeah, actually, so what you're describing is often something that precipitates a child sometimes cutting off contact for however long. And I have a very close friend who happens to be female who also got in a physical altercation with her older daughter who was 14 at the time. I
Ooh.
think it was a belt. She hit her with a belt.
Mhm.
And her mother and father, that my friend and her ex had been divorced for years. And her ex had been always saying bad things about her when the daughters went over there. And this was the opportunity because the older daughter, 14-year-old, they want to do what they want. They want to date and not have any rules. And that was the
Exactly.
other parent, which often happens in these dynamics. So as soon as her daughter ran to her father and said, "Mom hit me." And he was like, "No one's going to hit my daughter."
Mhm.
My friend was arrested, put in jail. And for 8 years, both her daughters did not speak to her at all. And she basically accepted that they were completely cut out of her life.
Yeah.
And they did come back as young adults, and I've had the opportunity to interview them about what the experience was like. But I'll say that the older daughter, who's now in her early 20s, was saying that she experienced so much guilt for what had happened. She said it was like she's 14. She said, "I never imagined that this would become like blow up this badly. I never
Right.
imagined that my mother would go to jail. I never imagined that my sister and I wouldn't they had a restraining order against her for a year." And just the fact that this turned into something from a teenager's quick, angry
Right.
decision, and then almost um, like embellishment, not quite a
Yeah.
lot. Like it's always like they take something with a grain of truth and then wrap it in lies. And my friend, who I'd known for years, she she was so heartbroken during those years of silence that and a big part of that was because she felt so betrayed by her daughter. Like, why would you say these things? Like, you knew the circumstances. You knew it wasn't just like I called on you, same as you. Like, I don't do that. There was a reason for that, but it just ended up being this horrific
Yeah.
situation.
And how do we recover from that? because yeah, as a parent, yes, you want to have a relationship with your child, but after somebody does something like that, I mean, and again, there is a bit of resentment, because even to this day, and this happened when she was younger, so that wasn't going to the police was not her doing, but the behavior since has been, well, you abused me and this, that, and other thing. And I'm like, listen, when your mom and I were together, I was the guy who picked you up every day from school. Okay. 5 days a week. I had you on the weekends, or, I saw you every day. And then when we split up, I still picked you up every day after work, you know, and you think that like I have somehow betrayed you by disciplining you, for something you did, and we still have a rocky relationship even today. We're like, I, hell, I don't think we've talked in probably about a year or two now. And it sucks because I just found out that, she's pregnant, and it's rough, to not be able to be there and help guide her and everything. These are you're making adult choices, now, and there's only so much I can do. This is the same thing I would say for a lot of, people going through a similar situation. My mom had told me early on that you may have to put some distance between you guys for a while, until she reaches an age where, you know what, she can understand you as a parent, understand your job, your duties as a father. So haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully, sooner than later.
Yeah.
Um,
I highly recommend. So the guy who wrote, I mean, we have advanced praise on the book, but on the back cover, the guy, his name is Dr. Josh Coleman. He's a psychologist. He's written several books, but one of his best-selling books that we used a lot in our research, and I've interviewed him, is something called Rules of Estrangement, and that's dealing with adult children. He just was on Oprah talking about this topic because I feel like in the past, narcissism, like nobody knew what it was, and now it's like everybody knows what it is, but I feel like alienation and estrangement are also on the rise in terms of people understanding what's going on and why. And I know that Josh often talks about how culturally we've shifted. In the past, children, adult children in particular, were always expected, like, I'm your parent, like no matter what happened in the past, like you're gonna love me because I took care of you. But the way, even like therapy culture, where it's like if I feel you were abused or you did anything wrong, then I'm cutting you off.
yeah,
Like culture is very different now. But in his book, Rules of Estrangement, he talks a lot about dealing with it effectively, especially with older children and anyone whose kids are still holding on to that kind of thing. I really recommend reading it because it's just fascinating. Yeah, he's good. The other thing I think about with when because my Chris and I deal with people going through the legal system, so their kids tend to be mostly under 18, and they're dealing with the other parent interfering with that relationship, doing whatever they can to sabotage it, which of course contributes to it happening later as well. And one mistake I think we make as parents is we focus on the truth and the facts, but kid doesn't really care about the facts. So we say, let's get to the feelings beneath it and let them talk and be like, for whatever reason, like, I want to hear what you have to say. And, with my own kids, like my son is 26, there's things he's resentful for them, like, we already talked about this, like, it's
yes,
like, why do you think it's such a big deal? I mean, I think it's almost like this expectation of perfection, and he'll say things like, mom, I thought, you think things are resolved when they're not. I'm like, but we talked about it and everything was
yes,
fine, so why is it still haunting you?
yeah. And see, and that is a thing right there. Like, I have had several conversations with my own kids thinking that, hey, we've buried these issues. And then for whatever reason, they just keep coming back up. I'm like, wait a second. So you guys are still sitting around upset about something I did almost 15 years ago, but
Right,
we just
right.
talked about it 6 months ago and everything was fine.
Same, right?
Yeah. And I don't get what else you're supposed to do. And for those people listening, I'd love to hear, people chime in, you know, send us a message because I'm curious if, obviously it's not just you and me, but I don't understand. Be like, what is the point of having a conversation if we're going to continue to bring up the past? We can't move forward if we're still looking in the rearview mirror.
Right. And especially if it feels like we've resolved the conflict
Yeah.
and that we both felt better. And now there's still this resentment that comes out a year later, and you're like, but we, like, why did we bother having that conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, because, like, I don't know how many more times you can apologize for a certain, whatever the issue might have been, so but, so let me ask you a question. Um, you're dealing with divorce. So when does divorce, custody battles, when do they cross a line from just a normal conflict, to something more dangerous?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's something we talk about in our first book, about like what are the indicators of, let's say, high conflict divorce. And in my own life, I was with my ex for almost 20 years. It really, those last 2 years, I would say the marriage was over, but I was planning my exit. And when I first approached a divorce attorney, within 20 minutes, he said, "Yours is going to be one of the bad ones." And I was astonished because I really truly believed that my ex was a good person who had done some bad things. But my
Yes.
lawyer was spot on. And after the divorce was over and years later, and, Chris and I started this career, I went back to him and said, "Eric, how did you know? Like, what were some
Yeah.
of those factors?" So, we started talking, and I kind of broke them down into a list of a few factors, like I said, that are in that first book. But one of them is what I mentioned earlier, is when you're dealing with someone who has a personality disorder or an active addiction. I'm not
Mm.
talking about anyone in recovery, but someone with
Yes.
impaired judgment means that they only think about short term. They're not thinking of the long term consequences, the impact the conflict is going to have on children, on money, whatever. So that makes things very, very difficult and not like a typical normal divorce. Supposedly, high conflict separations and divorces are only about 15% of cases, and that's why many lawyers are not experienced in that. Chris and I are not, but this is all we do. Like, we have hundreds of clients all over the world, high conflict cases, so we see it all the time. But that definitely leads to making things much more difficult. Another thing that's really interesting that Eric told me was that domestic violence cases, and I thought, oh, it's because because of like the whole victim abuser mentality. And he said, no, it's actually something I now think about as toxic hope, is when there's someone in one of these relationships where the power dynamic is, there's such a differential. They keep thinking that it's going to get better. So with a divorce, it's a process. You have deadlines and you have to get the paperwork. And a domestic violence victim will be like, well, we just had this talk and we might reconcile. So we have to stop. So lots of stopping and starting, which
Uh,
ends up costing a lot more money and taking a lot more time. That's another indication that it's not just dangerous, but like crazy expensive. So another thing is when somebody has the attitude, I always say, of like, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too, especially when it comes to children and money,
Woo.
um, where they feel like they are entitled to certain things because of whether they earned more money and they feel like, well, it's all my money, or they raise the kids and they feel like, well, they're my kids.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with someone like that, it's very, very difficult because the courts, when you get to that point, you have to share, unless there's, of course, like documented extreme abuse or neglect or any of the other factors that courts really look at. So that's just like a tiny little bit of some of the factors that indicate the difference between the crazy cases and normal, where everyone's angry in the beginning, but it settles down and you kind of move on with your.
Okay, so let me follow that up with, what do men yeah, what do men usually look or read in the beginning because they're trying to keep the peace in these relationships?
Okay, so men have a bigger challenge because in our society, men are seen where they're like, well, why, I mean, we've heard comments like, how could you be abused by this little person? Like, don't you have control over your woman? Like, what do it's still like these old fashioned ideas. And also, there's not as many resources for men to talk about things. There's also communities where it's assumed like happy wife, happy life. So if you're not happy, that's your problem. And they don't understand that, you know, women can be extremely abusive. Women can be physically violent. There's a guy that we interviewed years ago. He's 6'7".
Okay.
He his ex-wife used to fight with him and scream in his face and get really close and say, "I will slit your throat in your sleep." After they separated, he was still so terrified that he living in the house alone, he would board his door with the furniture because he was so frightened of her, but who is he gonna talk to? It's like, here's this huge guy, like, why would he be afraid of someone like that? So, that's really tough. I think also in some states and countries, when there's an altercation and there's a call made to the police, they have to arrest somebody. So we've seen a lot of false restraining orders. People bruise themselves and they say the other person did it, and the police are like, I'm not really sure. And who's the
Right,
one who might have more physical power. But one thing that we've noticed, a difference, not of course with everyone, but in general, the difference between our male and female clients, I think our men tend to have more of that toxic hope, where they keep thinking it might get better. I have to, this is the mother of my children. I have to make sure that she's taken care of. Like I'm so scared of not having a relationship with my children that I'll do anything. Like I will fix everything. I'll still be like emotionally and verbally and psychologically abused in front of the children, but I don't want to risk my relationship. So I just take it.
right,
That's what
and
we see
I've
more
seen
than
a lot of that.
yeah.
I've got friends who are in relationships that they have stayed in a relationship because they wanna be able to be a part of their kids' lives, and they take all kinds of stuff, being called stupid, being called lazy, but keep in mind, this person's working, 70, 80 hours a week, and it's far from lazy, but the relationship is they refuse to get out of the relationship because they wanna be there for their kids. They don't wanna and most of the times it's because their parents divorced and they remember what it was like going through that, going to see your dad sometimes, then being with your mom, going to see your dad sometimes, then being with your mom. So they're putting up with these things because, hey, I don't want my kids to go through the same thing I went through. And I mean, now the other side of that too, though, is that, I know some women who have gotten out of relationships, said, hey, this is not going to work. And the men have stopped seeing their kids because, well, if we can't be together, I'm not doing anything,
Yeah.
you know.
I know all about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is again not 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 the answer. I don't know what man. Oh, I know several actually, but would willingly give up, their kids because they can't be with the spouse, with the woman anymore. Your kids have nothing to do with that. So all right. So Lisa, I'm gonna
I
follow up.
wanna
Oh,
comment I wanna comment on the thing with children and staying in a relationship.
yeah,
It's very hard. It's never like a great choice either way when you're in an abusive relationship. But you have to understand that when you stay in one of those relationships, you're basically role modeling for your kids that this is
yeah,
normal and that it's familiar, and you are training your kids to follow those same dynamics. So I have a friend, his name is John. He has a handle on Instagram called Male Victims of Female Narcissists.
okay,
Many of his audience are also women. So
yes,
he also was alienated from his four adult children for 4 years. One of them just started coming back, and we did a whole amazing interview about that.
yeah,
But he said one of the things that he's noticed with two of his daughters is that they have not been doing well in their own romantic relationships as young women in their early 20s because they are doing the same behavior that his ex-wife did to him, just expecting the world, expecting that everything orbits around them, being very demeaning and
mhm,
insulting, and having these unrealistic expectations of whoever they're with that are just like, that's not right. So it didn't help them to stay in that relationship for all those years, even though, there's a lot of religious background there too about like
yeah,
divorce is a bad thing, but unfortunately it does have effects. Like either one is not good, but I personally think it's better to leave instead of making your kids think that this is the best that they're going to do.
yeah, and that's the same conversation I had with a friend of mine. I just keep telling him, you know what, I understand that you still love this person, but the emotional and the abuse that it's not physical, but verbal. To me, sometimes verbal abuse is far worse
Oh, yeah.
than what you do to a person physically.
Because
Well,
bruises heal, physical
yeah,
bruises here, but heal, but when you leave, we always say that person's voice stays in your head for
yeah,
years.
yeah. So, all right, listen, let me ask you another question. What are the biggest communication mistakes fathers make when dealing with a high conflict ex?
They pop off. They they lose their I mean, I think women do it too, but just
Yeah,
in general, the biggest communication is people don't realize that when they are behaving, especially when they put it in writing, that there is an I always say you're under the microscope of the court and it becomes exhibit A. So people are very angry and people are experiencing a big sense of injustice, which makes sense. But when you you memorialize that, and everyone's recording these days too, so even if you say it, you never know. That becomes the first thing that opposing counsel will trot right out to show
right.
how a terrible person you are, so you have to be very, very careful, and, I think that learning and this is what my partner Chris and I teach more than anything, something called strategic communication, where we say you're always writing to your ex, but for that invisible audience, and so you
Hmm.
wanna present as the most reasonable co-parent ever, and at the same time, you document your ex's patterns of behavior over time, not just singular instance, but patterns, and the visible impact it has on each of your children, and especially on your relationship with your children. So, because Chris and I only deal with high conflict cases, we know that kids are gonna be put in the middle. So, we wanna
Right.
start documenting like what's happening without without blaming, but sort of using what we call universal agreements. Like, I'm sure we can both agree how important it is to shield the kids from the conflict between us. I'm sure both of us love them and don't want them to have to have their lives disrupted any more than necessary. So when you say something like we both want the same thing, it's like you're dropping an anchor of a human value, which also aligns with what reasonable people, especially court, believes. Like, you don't involve kids in conflict.
Right.
When somebody is doing their bad behavior, then we kind of go back to it. Oh, the other day when you called me a narcissist in front of our daughter, and then she started repeating it. Like, I was kind of surprised because I'm sure we can both agree how our children deserve to have a close relationship with each of us. Boom, now it's on record. And that person can respond however they want. But really understanding how to communicate and understanding what to expect from the other side. We know that they're gonna bait you, rage bait you, they're gonna do things that get you to pop off, and so being aware of what they do and how they do it and why they do it, it makes things a lot easier to sort of emotionally detach from getting, like, stuck every single time, but that is probably one of the biggest
Yeah,
mistakes.
and I can tell you right now, I have bitten the bait more times than I care to admit.
Yeah.
And I knew at the time that this is what was happening, but I just couldn't believe, like, why? Why? Like I'm trying to bring my daughter home, one time and my ex wouldn't open the door. Well, it's cold outside, you know? And so what happens? I snap and I kick her door, but my daughter sees that,
Mhm.
you know?
Right, so you're in the wrong because it's
Yeah.
called reactive abuse.
Yes. And the thing is that, I'm like, here I go again, and this was one of those things I talked to my mom about. She was like, listen, you cannot keep letting this happen because no matter what happens in the end, you look like the bad guy, you know? And so I want to say about 3, 4 years. Yeah, probably about 3 years. I really didn't see my daughter at all because of this, because it was always something where, like, we would even try to meet in a, neutral location, but it would always be something to get started, and it just got to a point where even, her sisters were like, "Well, we want her to come to our birthday, but we know that her mom is gonna start a fight, so can you just tell her something so she doesn't come?" I'm like, "Holy shit." So now I've gotta lie, you know, to her to cover for her sisters because they know the drama and they just don't wanna do they wanna see their sister, but they don't want the BS at their birthday party or at a barbecue or whatever family function was going on. And that's another thing that even today I have to deal with because, she's like, "Well, you lied to me all those years." And the lying, I'm not gonna say I was justified. At the time, it was just the only solution where, at the time, no, there was we could have a good day and there not be any drama. Yeah, I wish we were never in that situation, but it is what it is at this point, you
Yeah.
know?
It's
So,
really hard, and everybody makes mistakes. Nobody's like a perfect parent or a perfect
yeah,
person, but when you've got an ex on the other side who's fueling that fire,
right.
who's not, calming things down and saying, "You know what? Like, that shouldn't have happened, blah, blah, blah," like, really supporting that relationship, it just makes things far worse. Like, one of our clients was telling us how years ago, he was so angry. I mean, he was homeless, he had just lost he had all kinds of pressure, all this stuff, bankruptcy, the divorce, everything at once, and he was really, really stressed, and, when he had the kids, they were calling their mother all the time, so it was like during his parenting time, he felt this sense of betrayal, and so one time he got really angry and he just broke the kid's phone. My gosh. You can imagine. Just
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
years later, and they're still talking about, like, him not taking accountability for breaking the phone, even though in his mind, he's like, "I apologize, I apologize." So
yeah,
it's just very, very hard. It's almost like you need to just keep talking it through, and you're like, "What else do I have to do?"
you're right. And
Yeah.
and 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 I see it in my own life, I see a lot of that, you know? There have been times where I've set my entire family down, and we have had conversations about things because, you know what? We just need to air all this bullshit out, and you know what? How can we how can we be better? You know? And again, I am not a saint. You know, I've had a lot of my own personal issues where I've been in and out of multiple relationships because, you know, I didn't have a good connection with, you know, like my own mom, you know,
Mhm.
so I was always out searching then I had this overwhelming need to be loved, and I just felt like no matter what relationship I got into, it wasn't gonna work out because I wasn't worthy of it, you know, but learned later on in life that that stemmed from other things, you know, and we all don't have the same situation, and I get that, but it's all been a process, and it's not like something I can really get my kids to understand or explain, you know, they they feel the way they feel, and I wish that I could change it. I wish that, you know, I think they won't understand a lot of the things that I tried to do until they have kids of their own. And
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I can tell you, I called my parents quite a few times when I realized that, hey, okay, you know what? This makes sense now. I need to, you know what? Hey, mom, I am so sorry that because so, you know, my parents have 4 kids. And as we moved out, you have more money for the kids that are remaining in the house. So, you know, the kids in the house get extra stuff.
Mhm,
There's fewer people in the house. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we never got any of that crap," you know? Oh, because my parents, you know, obviously, they liked them more than they did us.
mhm.
But as my kids started moving out, you know, my younger son, everybody's like, "Oh, you do so much for him." And I realized that, hey, it's because I just have more money in my pocket because you guys are all gone, you know? And when I called my mom to apologize, she just laughed, you know, didn't rub it in my face or nothing, but you know, she's glad I understood that I finally I learned,
Yeah.
essentially.
The
So
other thing, like, I'm really impressed with the, like, self-reflection, that you're able to do, but that in cases where, there's a difficult ex and they're turning the kids against you, a lot of it is triggering those old feelings. So
yeah,
your kids are doing the same stuff in different ways that your parents did, and so it's similar it's almost like you feel like if you were bullied as a child, they're doing it again. Now it's my own
yeah,
kids, and how could this be happening? So there's all that deep stuff that's, like,
excuse me.
repeating.
Alright, so let me ask you a question since we're, you know, talking about dads and, you know, getting baited. It's like when a father gets, you know, falsely accused or, you know, he gets himself baited into whatever situation, what would you how would you advise him rather? Smartest first move when you realize something like that is happening.
Okay, so it depends on the situation, but with our clients, a lot of it's like CPS, like Child Protective Services. There's been some
Okay.
false claim of abuse, and or just like domestic violence, and then you have to go to court and whatever. So the most important thing is you have to be as calm as you can. Understand that most of these accusations end up being unfounded. but that everyone freaks out because 'cause they're like, "Oh my god, I didn't do it, like, how could it even be happening?" And sometimes they'll also pop off to the workers who are investigating, which makes things worse. So understand that people have to do their job. It doesn't mean that you're gonna get in trouble. You might not necessarily need a lawyer present. You might, if you have a lawyer, you might wanna check, but you just try to stay as calm as you can and be like, "This just because they're talking to me doesn't mean that I'm guilty," and, like, start catastrophizing the worst thing that's gonna happen. If it continues, I recently met this guy named David Goldberg. He's a polygraph examiner. I had never thought of this as an option, but he talked about the importance of a polygraph and having the right examiner that can really disprove false allegations and like that's acceptable by courts and other people. And that he said the relief that people feel at
Mhm.
being believed when they see on paper, he said it's just astonishing. So that's something that I hadn't thought about recommending in the past, but after talking to David, I'm like anyone who's especially men and especially this time now, because false allegations are so common, that's a couple things to think about.
Right.
Try to stay as calm as you can, answer the questions, um, whether it's child protective services or domestic violencing, but know that you are one of many, many people, many, many men that are being falsely accused. Also realize that the timing matters a lot. So we've interviewed child protective services workers, and they've often said that when they look at the broader context and they see that there's a divorce or a separation or a custody battle, they're less likely to believe it because they're like, we got off from one of our male clients earlier. He's had 17 CPS investigations. Yeah, that have been unfounded. But every time it seems like he's making progress with his kids and, like, getting overnights or something, another one comes in. Hasn't I mean, you'd think at this point someone would do something, but now, like, CPS is calling, like, "Yeah, we gotta," and he's like, "I feel like I'm making friends." And we've heard that from other people, but just try not to panic.
Right. All right. So then, for a father, what do we do? What's the first thing we should do then to not escalate a situation
With a child or with the ex?
with the ex? Sorry.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing is really understanding. So educating yourself about what they're like and why. Because when you understand, like I always say, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Because ignorance and that fear is what makes us react. But when you understand that there people who are have personality disorders or addictions, active addictions, they're very, very predictable. And so when you
Okay.
start seeing like, oh, this is that, like one of our clients yesterday was saying that she had to take a high conflict co-parenting class with her ex. And she was like, this is like a domestic violence nightmare. I can't believe they're making me do it. And she did it. But because she was forced to have this phone call once a week with him, she said she started getting like desensitized because she made like a whole list of like, these are the kinds of behavior to be like, oh, now this is happening. Now this is happening. So having that detachment made things a lot easier to sort of accept. And she felt like it was developing her confidence more because she's like, oh, now I can see it. I can see it for what it is. And I'm not just like getting sucked into it. So I think, again, like understanding that and the course that Chris and I have about strategic communication is called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. We don't just talk about how to communicate, we get into how the other side communicates and why. And speaking of why, is you don't want to ask why ever, because you have to keep in mind that one of the things that that other person wants is your attention. More than anything, they want your attention. They want you to engage. And if it can't be your positive attention, they love your negative attention because it shows that they still have a presence in your life. So
Right.
just even remembering that, like the more I keep going back and forth, the more I'm feeding them. We want to starve them. So not to completely cut off contact when you're dealing with children, you have to co-parent, but there's ways to do it where you're not like it's the back and forth and your ex is like really getting off on it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about court a little bit. So I know from personal experience and from things that I talk to men and women about, but specifically for fathers, most guys feel like the court system isn't built to hear them. It's not for them. It is basically a stomping ground. Okay.
Women feel the exact same way.
You think? Okay.
I
Well,
know.
yep. You would. I mean, from my point of view, it's just, from my side,
Yeah,
from my
yeah.
side of the court, but
Everybody suffers in court.
right. What should men do before they even go into court? You know, because they've already got these preconceived notions about this judge isn't here to hear me. It's all going to go against me anyway. How should they be preparing, for court?
Okay, so first of all, they have to stop doom scrolling. They
Okay.
have to stop reading stories and associating with groups where people are really angry and have failed in court, because those are the extreme cases, and most things act even the most high conflict situations settle out of court. So for us, we want you to meet professionals who are what we call positive advocates. And I got this concept from Bill Eddy, the one who wrote the forward to our book, who's, the guru of this stuff. He talks about how sometimes positive negative advocates can be people that love us, like our friends and family, who'll be like, "You deserve this. She's awful. You should get," like that just inflames things. A positive advocate is trying to settle things down to be like, we're going to figure it out. Let's put the kids first. Let's figure out like how we can come up with the schedule. Like it's not about right and wrong. It's like let's work together and do the best we can, but to keep the conflict as low as possible. So that's like from the very beginning, you want to find an attorney with high social emotional skills that can understand that we're not going to go in and blame and accuse and attack and start filing motions, because someone who's got the issues we talked about is going to feel like like an abused animal, and they're just going to bite back really hard, and it's going to
Right.
blow up in court. So we want to keep it out of court. The other thing is to understand that there's many people who do extremely well in court, but you don't hear as much about that. So to find people who have had success. So in our weekly legal abuse support group, I always say we do a very unusual thing in the domestic violence space, in that we blend our men and women together, because we firmly believe that abuse is a human issue. And so for men and women to hear each other's perspectives is really, really important. And also to have them help support each other, because they want the same thing. Like these are the good parents who care about the kids. So in the group, we have something, we call it our balloon man. When you're outside like a car dealership, they have the wavy tube guy.
Yeah, yeah.
That's our little victory symbol. So often in our groups, people will talk about things that happened that were good for them, and we'll have the little balloon man. We also have a monthly newsletter that I call From Puddle to Ninja. That's our little hashtag. And it has like stories that we've gotten just in the past month from men and women clients about like what has happened that has gone really, really well. So for example, last month, one of our guys who has had, awful situation for so long, sent us a photograph of
Okay.
big sneaker and a little baby shoe behind each other. The big shoe is in front. He said, "This is the first time since the baby shoe that my son has come for an overnight. Like finally, 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 after all of these years of fighting, I got him back." So people feel like it's never going to happen, like their ex is being impossible. But hearing those victory stories is so important to inspire people.
Hmm.
The worst thing you can do for yourself when you're in court is to read about all the bad stuff and associated with people who keep you stuck in a trauma loop, because it's going to impact how you do. Like already thinking I'm gonna do badly, you're gonna do
Hmm.
bad. So you
Okay.
have to change the people you surround yourself with, who can really teach you about what can be done, because there's so many. I mean, we teach the art of persuasion. There's people who are great debaters can argue strongly for either side. They can flip on you. So there's ways to be very persuasive, even with bad evidence sometimes.
Right.
People often worry, men will be like, "Oh my gosh, I've been an alcoholic, like I did stupid things, like the court's gonna look at me in such a bad way." And we try to say, well, but what they're gonna be asking for is what you have done to work on yourself. So let's say
Right.
you are an alcoholic, and you had a DWI, but since then you've been involved in AA, you have a sponsor, you took these classes, like you have the opportunity to show that you work on yourself. People love to see that. You have a better chance than someone who never had a problem, because you've had to work so much harder. So you're going to look
Right.
really good in court. So instead of being terrified about like, oh, I was in rehab or something, like this
Right.
is your opportunity. But right now, start taking the classes, start working really hard, so you have something to show for when you go to court.
See, and I would have never thought that the court would care about, you working on yourself just more about.
Absolutely. The other thing is courts want kids to have a relationship with both parents. They are always looking at how can we repair the rupture? What can we do? So if someone comes in there and they're like, I will do anything to lower the level of conflict between my ex and I so that my kids aren't stuck in it. Like I just want them to have as happy and healthy lives as possible. You're gonna look like a rock star. But you gotta actually act that way. So
Right.
lowering the conflict, number one thing.
Okay. All right. So, Lisa, we're gonna talk about you real quick. Okay. Because listen, I'm going back to this. You representing yourself is pretty impressive. I'm not gonna lie to you. So, what you represent yourself, what did that teach you? That most people probably never learn until it's too late.
My gosh, it taught me how to keep getting back up. And
Okay.
that you can always learn because you make a
Right.
lot of mistakes in 10 years in court.
Yeah.
So I learned so much along the way. I learned that when you go to court, it's like you're paying $8 million for a 30-second Super Bowl commercial. You got to be tight. You got to know what you're going to say. It's like, here's what I'm here for. This is what I'm asking for. This is why I'm entitled to it. You have to learn how to read body language. Like it makes you more confident, though. It made me so much more confident, and getting my case published as case I was like, I didn't even imagine anything like that would happen, and the
Right.
footnotes about my ex's one of his bullying attorneys, it was so satisfying. So it's
Right.
such an opportunity for, like, your own personal triumph to go through this hell. So I think just realizing that it's really scary, but everything is an opportunity, and it's okay to mess up because you don't know what you're doing, but if you just keep getting up and you have the support of others who can encourage you to keep getting back up even after those gut punches, you'll find that it affects other areas of your lives in amazing ways that you never expected.
Right. Okay. So, with that, let's follow up with um, what do you people who self-represent themselves? Okay. What are the probably I'd say the biggest pitfalls? What's the biggest mistakes that those people make?
Thinking that they know as much as lawyers.
Oh,
You don't
that
you
makes
don't
sense. That makes sense.
You don't wanna cut so my partner, Chris, is really good with quotes. He said I'll change it a little bit because 'cause we're talking about fathers. He said, if you come into court like Papa Bear, you're gonna get bitten by the system." This, like, protective parent, like, protective father, like, "I'm gonna come in and tell you what my rights are, blah, blah, blah." You're gonna lose because you have to understand courtroom etiquette. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You're Dorothy and you're dealing with a wizard, like, you have no power. So to
Right.
be very differential, to understand where you are in that totem pole, you're at the bottom, and so understanding, like, how things work is really important. Understand that AI does not replace people. There's been so many people trying to DIY it and using AI. I mean, one of our male clients, I was like, "What are you doing?" He used AI to come up with 17 different arguments of what opposing counsel was going to possibly say to keep his daughters away from him. None of them made any sense. He had
Right.
himself twisted in a knot. I was like, stop doing this. Went in and got his daughters back. And it was exactly like we told him, like, you've got this great case, focus on that. And so he wasted all this energy catastrophizing. And he was like this huge success story that
Right.
he was so shocked that he got him back. He was like, I don't know if they need like a transitional time to get used to it. I said, they don't need it. You do because you can't believe that you actually won. You know,
Right.
they're ready for you now. Like, take them. You're taking them for overnights. Like, you're
Okay.
good.
Speaking of parenting time, why? And again, I can only speak to my case, and the issues that I've had. Why is it that so we have kids together? You know, I'm responsible for all these things for my child. When I'm a part of their life, we split up. I'm still responsible for all those things, but somehow or another, I don't have the right to see my child that those rights are appointed to me.
So, like, why not 50-50?
Yeah, why not 50-50? Or why is it that, I get like a weekend a month or, every other holiday?
Yeah, Chris calls that the 70s plan.
Okay.
So, before the 70s, there was the house in America. The roles were like women tended to stay home and take care of the kids, and men tended to work. And like heterosexual couples. And so, but things changed. Like women started working, could take care of children. And so in many states, they gravitate more towards 50-50, but it depends on like someone's schedule and whatever. So I think that the mistake that men make is they don't realize their rights. They don't
Right.
realize. I mean, there's sometimes, the schedule actually matters. Like if you're working all the time, you can't be like, well, I'm gonna get a nanny and just like not pay child support. Like that looks really bad. So it really depends on the situation. But I think men in general have this idea that it's only going to be like that, and they don't know how to build a persuasive case because, again, the courts want it to be more shared parenting time. They want involved fathers.
Right. So essentially, men have to learn their rights and what they're what they should be entitled to. Because I can tell you right now, I wish that there was somebody around, right? When I was going through it, to have this conversation with, because I felt like every time I went into the court, no matter how many times I petitioned the court for more parenting time, you know, it was just always, hey, you're okay. Well, maybe we'll give you an extra weekend, and I went for that. Like I said, I went from having my daughter 5 to 6 days a week to, once a month.
Yep. So to
So
me, that's something we see all the time. So one of the things we do on the first meeting with someone is we go through custody factors and alienation factors. So people
okay,
think like I'm just going to make a case, but they don't understand the factors that the law considers. So
okay,
we go through like 19 different things, no, 17 different things. And then we say, let's pick like two or three that are the themes of your case where you have the strongest evidence. So from
okay,
what you're saying, for example, like where you were the primary caretaker, where you were there all the time, I would talk about consistency, stability, and routine, like go into some storytelling techniques of like what you've done so people get pictures in their head of like, well, here's this really involved dad. Like I was the one who took her to ballet classes, and I, like where it's images people are thinking, not just telling like this is what I did, and
right,
using the language of the court and those custody factors to make a persuasive, compelling case. But people don't know what the factors are. They don't understand how to put it together. And then they're just like, I don't know why I didn't get it. It's like because you didn't know what you were arguing about the wrong things. And that's why we learn along the way. And everybody can learn.
right. I mean, again, like I said, I wish, God, I wish that I had somebody like you around that
Thank
could have
you.
explained this to me, when I was going through my situation. And, I try to tell, like, even my brother went through a little situation. And I was like, I didn't even know how to help him because I was still on the same train with, hey, court's gonna F you in the A, so you might as well get ready for it, buddy. You
Yeah.
know?
No, and
And
see, I'd be like, don't say that. Like, that's like our clients, we say, stay away from people who are going to say that to you because
yeah,
you're going to believe that and it's going to come true. It's going to be a self fulfilling prophecy. But many of our dads do extremely well. I know we have to go in a second. But like, we just had one of our biggest victories this past week. I'm not just saying this, like, it
yeah,
really just happened. One of our dads got custody completely flipped.
mhm,
Just got
really?
yep, primary physical. I mean, it was extreme situation, but he had tried a couple times in the past, hadn't gotten anywhere, and we call it usefully awful. His ex kept giving him more usefully awful evidence of just unbelievable behavior and evidence, and we went through how to do it, and he had a lawyer who listened, and they flipped physical custody and legal decision making, and our client is also kind of like, "I don't even know what to do now." It's so crazy. So those
Yeah.
things do happen.
So, where can people reach out to you at?
Okay, super easy. So our website is beentheregotout.com. We're all over social media. Instagram's my home base. It's at been there got out with little underscores. We have been there got out podcast with like 360 plus interviews from just the past few years. We have a YouTube channel. The two books are on Amazon, and we have courses. We have a course that's hopefully will be out this summer called the Alienation Masterclass: How to Protect Your Relationship with Your Children in and Out of Court.
Outstanding.
And it's
Alright,
just Chris and me, so we always answer.
okay, perfect. Alright,
Yeah,
guys, you heard that. Lisa, listen, we gotta do this again.
I'm happy. Just reach
Okay,
out.
Imma send you a message in a little bit because there are a ton of follow-up questions. Yeah, this very
I
educational.
am happy to help. I love, like, I mean, my background was as a high school English teacher. I love teaching. I love seeing the impact that it has. when
Okay.
people learn what to do right, and then it happens, then their lives get better.
Well, that's my goal is to try to put, again, put men in a better situation, make smarter decisions. So thank you so much for coming on the show. We're definitely having you back in probably like the next week or two.
My
Schedules,
pleasure.
schedules provide.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Michael, for talking to me. Hey, you too. Bye.